Hello, and welcome back. Before we begin, I want to gently remind you that the story you're about to hear is based on real crimes involving real people. Some names, locations, and identifying details have been changed to protect privacy, but the events themselves come from documented investigations, court records, and witness statements. These stories are told slowly and calmly, intended for nighttime listening. If disturbing material affects you, this is a good moment to stop. For everyone else, get comfortable. Let your breathing slow. Let the quiet settle fully around you. And as you listen, tell me in the comments where you're watching from tonight. I read every one. If you enjoy these true crime stories for sleep, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future uploads. This story begins in a place most people associate with comfort and normality, a chain of small, family-owned coffee shops scattered throughout a city. They were popular with late-night students, night shift workers, and anyone seeking a quiet place to relax. Patrons came for warmth, for light, for routine. The staff was small, familiar with regulars, and relied on cameras primarily for security and cash protection. For years, nothing unusual was reported. People came and went without incident. Some stayed for hours, reading or working on laptops. Others only stopped for a cup of coffee and a snack. Then, small, odd incidents began. A barista noticed a regular customer leaving their belongings in an odd place and later discovered that someone had moved them. Nothing was missing, but the feeling of intrusion lingered. Another barista mentioned a man who sat quietly at a table, observing people without ever ordering anything. Customers often didn't notice him, or assumed he was just waiting. Weeks later, a student who frequented the coffee shop late at night vanished. Her laptop was found still plugged in at her usual table. Her notebook and backpack remained on a chair. Staff initially assumed she had stepped out, but hours passed. Calls went unanswered. Police were notified when her roommates reported her missing. Then another disappearance followed the same pattern. A night shift worker who had visited the same shop multiple times over the previous month failed to return home. His car was found in a nearby lot. His coffee cup was still on the counter, warm but abandoned. Surveillance footage captured him entering the shop, but not leaving. Investigators reviewed months of footage, paying special attention to anyone appearing at the same time as the missing individuals. They noticed a man, a staff member from another nearby location, appearing repeatedly, often lingering near patrons, sometimes pretending to read a book, sometimes walking past multiple tables slowly as if scanning the room. He never acted aggressively. He never interrupted anyone. He simply observed, quietly and consistently. Former employees and patrons recalled odd moments they had dismissed. A man offering to help with a laptop or charger when it wasn't needed. A figure appearing near the restroom just as someone left. Small gestures, seemingly benign, that now appeared deliberate. Police eventually traced the man's movements across the city. He had knowledge of multiple coffee shops, their layouts, and their typical traffic patterns. He knew which locations were monitored and which cameras didn't fully cover certain areas. He had observed patterns for months, noting who came late, who left alone, who stayed quietly for hours. A search of his apartment revealed personal items taken from multiple victims, laptops, notebooks, wallets, and small personal effects. They were not sold, not destroyed, but carefully kept. Alongside them were handwritten notes detailing dates, times, seating arrangements, and patterns of behavior. Some entries were circled, some crossed out. When questioned, he admitted that coffee shops were ideal. People were relaxed. People were focused inward. He said he relied on that trust and distraction. He never rushed. He let moments unfold naturally, waiting until someone was isolated or distracted before acting. The case shocked the community. Coffee shops added more staff during late hours, updated camera systems, and instituted stricter check-in procedures. But for many patrons, the sense of safety and normalcy never returned. This story is disturbing because it unfolded in a place meant for warmth, comfort, and routine. It didn't rely on chaos or confrontation. It relied on observation, patience, and the assumption that nobody would question subtle anomalies in ordinary spaces. True crime reminds us that danger doesn't always announce itself. It can hide in the quiet corners of familiarity, in moments we assume are safe. Awareness isn't about fear, it's about noticing what doesn't belong. Thank you for listening. If you're still here, tell me where you're watching from tonight, and don't forget to subscribe for more true crime stories for sleep, based on real events and told slowly, calmly, and without interruption. Sleep well tonight, and stay aware. Hello, and welcome back. Before we begin, I want to gently remind you that the story you're about to hear is based on real crimes involving real people. Some names, locations, and identifying details have been changed to protect privacy, but the events themselves come from documented investigations, court records, and witness statements. These stories are told slowly and calmly, intended for nighttime listening. If disturbing material affects you, this is a good moment to stop. For everyone else, get comfortable. Let your breathing slow. Let the quiet of the room stretch out around you. And as you listen, tell me in the comments where you're watching from tonight. I read every one. If you enjoy these true crime stories for sleep, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future uploads. This story begins in a place people associate with isolation but not danger, a large public library in a mid-sized city. It was quiet, orderly, and heavily used. Students studied there late into the night. People experiencing homelessness came in to rest and stay warm. Office workers stopped by after work to return books. It was one of the few places where everyone blended together. The library stayed open until 10 most nights. Security guards were present, but they focused mainly on noise complaints and closing procedures. Serious incidents were rare. The first disappearance went unnoticed. A man in his 40s, known to staff as a regular, stopped coming in. He spent hours every evening reading newspapers and using the computers. No one questioned his absence. People drifted in and out of the library all the time. Months later, a graduate student failed to return home after an evening study session. Her backpack was found in her car. Her phone last pinged near the library, but no one had seen her leave. Police reviewed security footage. Cameras covered entrances, exits, and main reading areas, but not every aisle between shelves. Footage showed her studying alone near the back of the building. At one point, a man sat several tables away. He left the frame briefly, then returned, sitting closer. When the library closed, both exited within minutes of each other. At first, investigators assumed coincidence. Then another person vanished. This time, it was a man who used the library computers nightly. Staff remembered him because he always stayed until closing. Footage showed him packing up as usual. The same man appeared nearby again, standing close enough to seem casual, far enough to avoid attention. Detectives expanded their review and discovered the man appeared repeatedly over several years. Sometimes he stayed for hours without reading or using a computer. Sometimes he wandered slowly through the stacks. He never caused trouble. He never spoke loudly. He was forgettable. Former library staff were interviewed. Some recalled feeling uneasy around him but couldn't explain why. One employee remembered finding him sitting in darkened sections of the library after closing announcements had been made. When asked to leave, he complied politely. A breakthrough came when a janitor reported something strange. He had noticed a particular emergency exit alarm had been disabled more than once. The door led to a service alley that was poorly lit and rarely used. Police searched nearby and found personal items hidden behind a dumpster enclosure: wallets, notebooks, identification cards. Items belonging to people reported missing. Investigators identified the suspect as a man who worked sporadic overnight jobs nearby. He had no permanent address and spent many evenings inside the library. He knew the building's routines, blind spots, and quiet corners. He knew which exits were rarely monitored. When questioned, he admitted that libraries were ideal. People were distracted. Silence discouraged attention. Strangers didn't stand out. He relied on the assumption that nothing bad happened in places built for learning. He described watching people over weeks, sometimes months, learning their schedules, waiting for nights when they stayed late and left alone. He never rushed. He waited until closing time, when staff were focused on procedures, not individuals. What disturbed investigators most was how long it took to notice a pattern. Libraries served transient populations. Students graduated. Regulars disappeared without anyone questioning why. After the case became public, the library made changes. Cameras were added between aisles. Closing procedures were updated. Staff escorts were offered at night. But for many patrons, the sense of quiet safety never fully returned. This story is disturbing because it unfolded in a place associated with knowledge and calm. A place people go to focus, to escape noise, to feel safe among others doing the same. It didn't rely on force or chaos. It relied on silence, routine, and invisibility. True crime reminds us that danger doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it sits quietly nearby, waiting for the moment no one is paying attention. Thank you for listening. If you're still here, tell me where you're watching from tonight, and don't forget to subscribe for more true crime stories for sleep, based on real events and told slowly, calmly, and without interruption. Sleep well tonight, and stay aware. Hello, and welcome back. Before we begin, I want to gently remind you that the story you're about to hear is based on real crimes involving real people. Some names, locations, and identifying details have been changed to protect privacy, but the events themselves come from documented investigations, court records, and witness statements. These stories are told slowly and calmly, intended for nighttime listening. If disturbing material affects you, this is a good moment to stop. For everyone else, get comfortable. Let your breathing slow. Let the room grow quiet. And as you listen, tell me in the comments where you're watching from tonight. I read every one. If you enjoy these true crime stories for sleep, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future uploads. This story begins in a place most people associate with temporary calm, a long-distance train that ran overnight between major cities. It wasn't luxurious, but it was reliable. Passengers boarded in the evening, settled into their seats or small sleeper cabins, and expected to wake up hours later somewhere else. For many, it was a peaceful way to travel. The train stopped at dozens of stations along its route. Some were large and busy. Others were quiet platforms in small towns, lit by a few flickering lamps. Conductors checked tickets, announced stops, and moved through the cars with routine familiarity. For years, nothing seemed wrong. The first missing person was a young man traveling alone. He boarded late in the evening and was last seen settling into his seat near the rear of the train. His family reported him missing days later when he never arrived at his destination. Investigators assumed he got off early or missed a connection. Then another passenger disappeared. This time, it was a woman traveling for work. Her luggage was found still stored above her seat when the train reached its final stop. Staff assumed she had left it behind accidentally. Only later did they realize no one had seen her disembark. At first, the cases weren't linked. Trains carried hundreds of passengers. People moved between cars. Some got off unexpectedly. It was easy for individuals to slip through unnoticed. But over time, more reports surfaced. Always overnight routes. Always passengers traveling alone. Always no clear record of when or where they left the train. Railway police began reviewing surveillance footage. Cameras covered entrances to cars and some shared areas, but not every corridor or sleeper compartment. In multiple cases, the missing passengers were last seen walking toward the restroom or between cars. Investigators noticed something unsettling. In each case, the same individual appeared nearby in earlier footage. A man who seemed to move easily between cars. Sometimes he wore a jacket. Sometimes a hat. He blended in perfectly with other passengers. He was never seen sitting for long. He stood in doorways, leaned against walls, and watched quietly. He appeared to know exactly when conductors would pass through and when sections of the train would be empty. Former passengers were interviewed. Some recalled small moments they hadn't thought much about. A man asking which stop they were getting off at. Someone offering help finding a seat that didn't exist. Someone standing too close in narrow corridors without apologizing. One passenger described waking briefly during the night and seeing someone standing in the aisle, unmoving. She assumed it was a staff member and went back to sleep. A breakthrough came when a conductor reported something odd. He had noticed a man traveling on the same route repeatedly, often without a clear destination. Sometimes he bought a ticket for only a few stops but stayed on much longer. When questioned, he claimed confusion or fatigue. Railway police identified him as a temporary contractor who had previously worked cleaning trains overnight. He knew the layout of multiple train models. He knew which doors could be opened between cars without triggering alarms. He knew which stops were unstaffed. A search of storage lockers at a remote rail yard revealed personal items belonging to several missing passengers. Backpacks, identification cards, jewelry, items carefully packed and labeled. Nothing was damaged. Nothing was sold. Investigators later learned that he targeted passengers based on isolation. People who slept deeply. People who wore headphones. People who traveled frequently and were less likely to raise alarm if they missed a stop. He admitted that trains were ideal. Movement masked sound. Night masked visibility. Staff assumed passengers moved around. No one questioned why someone wasn't in their seat. What disturbed investigators most was how long the pattern went unnoticed. Each disappearance happened in a different city, different jurisdictions, different police departments. It took years to connect them. After the case became public, railway companies updated safety protocols. More cameras were installed. Conductors were instructed to check cars more frequently overnight. Announcements encouraged passengers to stay aware and report anything unusual. But for many people, overnight train travel never felt the same again. The quiet hum of the tracks carried a new unease. This story is disturbing because it unfolded in a place meant for rest and transition. A place where people surrender awareness and trust routine to carry them safely through the night. It didn't rely on force or panic. It relied on movement, anonymity, and the assumption that someone else was paying attention. True crime reminds us that danger can exist even while everything feels calm. Even while the world moves forward as expected. Thank you for listening. If you're still here, tell me where you're watching from tonight, and don't forget to subscribe for more true crime stories for sleep, based on real events and told slowly, calmly, and without interruption. Sleep well tonight, and stay aware. Hello, and welcome back. Before we begin, I want to gently remind you that the story you're about to hear is based on real crimes involving real people. Some names, locations, and identifying details have been changed to protect privacy, but the events themselves come from documented investigations, court records, and witness statements. These stories are told slowly and calmly, intended for nighttime listening. If disturbing material affects you, this is a good moment to stop. For everyone else, get comfortable. Let your breathing slow. Let the quiet stretch fully around you. And as you listen, tell me in the comments where you're watching from tonight. I read every one. If you enjoy these true crime stories for sleep, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future uploads. This story begins in a place most people assume is perfectly safe, a community gym open 24 hours a day. People came to exercise at all hours, students after late classes, night shift workers, elderly patrons in the early morning. The gym was well lit, monitored by security cameras, and staffed by a small overnight crew. It was meant to be a space of energy, health, and routine. For years, nothing unusual occurred. Patrons left their belongings in lockers. They followed familiar routes around the equipment. Trainers and staff knew many members by name. The building was calm but busy at odd hours. Then small incidents began. A woman reported that someone had moved her water bottle and gym bag between machines. Nothing was missing, but the feeling of intrusion lingered. Another patron noticed a man watching quietly from a distance while she used the treadmill. He never approached. He never spoke. He simply observed. Weeks later, a young man who regularly used the gym late at night stopped showing up. His friends assumed he had changed his routine. Days passed. Then, after a week of unanswered messages, his family reported him missing. Police reviewed security footage from the gym. Cameras covered entrances, equipment areas, and locker rooms, but blind spots remained along hallways, corners, and less used areas. Footage showed him entering the building as usual, but he was never seen leaving. Months later, another regular late-night member vanished under similar circumstances. Both had been alone, both had left their bags in lockers, both were last seen in the same area of the gym. Attention turned to a long-term gym employee who worked overnight shifts in a neighboring area. He was described as polite, quiet, and professional. Staff barely noticed him. He blended easily into the routine of cleaning machines, checking equipment, and assisting members. Investigators noticed a pattern. His presence coincided with the times the missing patrons were last seen. Security footage showed him moving slowly, lingering near members without interacting, and sometimes walking down corridors between camera coverage. Former members were interviewed again. Many remembered subtle interactions that had felt off but harmless at the time. A man offering to help adjust weights, someone standing silently near a machine as if waiting, a figure passing by without explanation multiple times in one night. A breakthrough came when a maintenance worker reported something strange in a rarely used storage closet. Inside, investigators found personal belongings, phones, wallets, keys, belonging to multiple missing gym-goers. Each item was neatly labeled and carefully stored. Searches of the suspect's home revealed detailed notes. Names, dates, gym schedules, observations about habits, patterns, and routines. Some notes circled particular members who came alone late at night, others marked times when the gym was less populated. When questioned, the man admitted that gyms were ideal. People were distracted, tired, focused on exercise, and assumed safety because the building was open, lit, and monitored. He described patience, careful observation, and the subtle moments when no one noticed him as the key to his actions. The case shocked the community. Gyms installed more cameras, updated staff monitoring procedures, and limited late-night access. But for many patrons, returning to the space never felt the same. This story is disturbing because it took place in a space meant for health, wellness, and personal growth. It didn't rely on force, confrontation, or noise. It relied on quiet, routine, and the assumption that safety is guaranteed by familiarity. True crime reminds us that danger often hides in ordinary spaces, waiting for routine and trust to lower awareness. It teaches that attention to subtle patterns can make the difference between safety and harm. Thank you for listening. If you're still here, tell me where you're watching from tonight, and don't forget to subscribe for more true crime stories for sleep, based on real events and told slowly, calmly, and without interruption. Sleep well tonight, and stay aware. Hello, and welcome back. Before we begin, I want to gently remind you that the story you're about to hear is based on real crimes involving real people. Some names, locations, and identifying details have been changed to protect privacy, but the events themselves come from documented investigations, court records, and witness statements. These stories are told slowly and calmly, intended for nighttime listening. If disturbing material affects you, this is a good moment to stop. For everyone else, get comfortable. Let your breathing slow. Let the quiet stretch fully around you. And as you listen, tell me in the comments where you're watching from tonight. I read every one. If you enjoy these true crime stories for sleep, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future uploads. This story begins in a place most people associate with routine and predictability, a large, sprawling airport that served as a hub for both domestic and international travelers. It was bustling during the day and quieter late at night, especially in certain terminals that were primarily used for long-haul flights. For travelers, the airport was a transitional space, a place to wait, to rest, to move between destinations. Staff assumed that with security measures in place, everything was safe. For years, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Travelers passed through terminals without incident. Night shift staff monitored gates and walkways. Airport security cameras were everywhere, covering entrances, exits, and ticketing areas. People assumed that being in a well-monitored, controlled environment meant they were protected. Then subtle irregularities began to appear. A late-night traveler reported that her luggage had been shifted between the rows of trolleys where she had left it. Nothing was missing, but the feeling of being watched lingered. Another traveler noticed a man who seemed to appear in multiple areas of the terminal, always quietly observing passengers without ever interacting. Weeks later, a young business traveler failed to board his scheduled flight. Staff assumed he had missed it and left for a later one. Hours passed. When his colleagues tried contacting him and received no response, they alerted authorities. Security footage showed him moving through the terminal, passing through checkpoints, but never leaving the building. Then another passenger disappeared under eerily similar circumstances. Her identification and boarding pass were found neatly folded in a trash bin near the security checkpoint. Other belongings, including her phone, were missing. The circumstances were puzzling and unsettling. Investigators began reviewing security footage more closely, focusing on unusual patterns. They noticed a man, a worker contracted for maintenance and cleaning at the airport, appearing repeatedly near the missing individuals. He moved slowly, almost blending into the background, carefully observing people without making his presence obvious. He wore different clothing at different times but always moved the same way. Former airport staff were interviewed. Some recalled subtle moments they had dismissed at the time: a man offering to help someone with a luggage trolley, a figure appearing behind passengers when they paused to check flight information, someone sitting quietly near empty gates for hours. Each incident seemed harmless alone, but together formed a troubling pattern. A breakthrough came when an airport janitor noticed that certain maintenance closets had been opened recently without explanation. One closet, rarely used and tucked behind a gate, contained personal items, passports, wallets, electronics, and other belongings of missing travelers. Each item was organized and stored carefully, almost like a collection. Investigators traced the suspect's movements across multiple terminals. He was familiar with the airport's security systems, blind spots, and times when staff presence was minimal. He had knowledge of access codes and maintenance schedules, which allowed him to move undetected for hours. Police also discovered notebooks filled with notes about travelers, arrival and departure times, gate assignments, behaviors, seating preferences, and times of day certain individuals were alone. Some pages had dates circled, others crossed out, indicating repeated observation. When questioned, the man admitted that airports were ideal for his purposes. Travelers were focused on schedules, tired, and often distracted. They assumed that with cameras and staff around, nothing bad could happen. He relied on that sense of security, patience, and his ability to blend into the environment. He described observing patterns for weeks, sometimes months, choosing the moments when travelers were isolated enough for him to act. What shocked investigators most was the scope and subtlety of his actions. He had taken advantage of a highly controlled environment that people assumed was inherently safe. Each incident appeared minor or coincidental when viewed alone, but together they revealed a calculated and methodical predator. After the arrest, airport security protocols changed dramatically. Cameras were upgraded, staff schedules were adjusted, and access to maintenance areas was restricted. Travelers were advised to remain alert and report anything unusual. Yet for many who worked or traveled through the airport, the sense of normalcy was gone. This story is disturbing because it unfolded in a place designed for efficiency, safety, and constant oversight. It didn't rely on chaos or violence. It relied on observation, patience, and the assumption that routine creates security. Even in the brightest, most monitored spaces, danger can exist quietly, invisible to those who assume they are safe. True crime reminds us that danger often hides in the predictable and familiar. It shows that awareness and attention to subtle patterns can protect us in places where we feel most secure. Thank you for listening. If you're still here, tell me where you're watching from tonight, and don't forget to subscribe for more true crime stories for sleep, based on real events and told slowly, calmly, and without interruption. Sleep well tonight, and stay aware.
Hello, and welcome back. Before we begin, I want to remind you that the story you're about to hear is based on real crimes involving real people. Certain names, locations, and identifying details have been changed to protect privacy, but the events themselves are drawn from documented investigations, court records, and witness accounts. This story is meant to be listened to slowly and quietly. If disturbing content affects you, it's okay to stop listening now. For everyone else, get comfortable. Let your breathing slow. Let the quiet of the room settle around you. And as you listen, tell me in the comments where you're watching from tonight. I always enjoy reading them. If you enjoy these true crime stories for sleep, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future uploads. This story begins in a place most people consider unremarkable, a large suburban shopping center that stayed open late. It wasn't a mall, just a cluster of stores surrounding a wide parking lot, grocery, pharmacy, discount retail, a few restaurants. People came and went all day and night, often alone, often distracted. For years, nothing seemed wrong. Security patrols were minimal but visible. Cameras covered entrances and drive lanes. Shoppers assumed that the constant flow of cars and people meant safety. The first incident was easy to ignore. A woman reported that someone had approached her car late at night and asked for help finding a lost phone. She declined and drove away. She told friends about it but never reported it. Nothing bad happened. Weeks later, another shopper described a similar interaction. Someone lingering near her car. Someone asking questions that felt unnecessary. She brushed it off as awkward but harmless. Then a man who worked night shift stopped answering calls. His family later discovered his car still parked in the shopping center lot. The vehicle was locked. His phone and wallet were inside. Security footage showed him walking toward his car after a late-night grocery run. He was never seen leaving. Police initially believed it was an isolated case. People vanished for many reasons. But months later, another car was found in the same lot under similar circumstances. Then another. Detectives began reviewing hours of surveillance footage. The cameras captured wide angles of the lot but not close detail between rows of cars. In multiple cases, a figure could be seen moving between vehicles just before disappearances. The figure never ran. Never hurried. Sometimes it paused beside a car, then walked away. Investigators noticed a pattern. The same individual appeared on different nights, often wearing different clothing, but moving the same way. He arrived on foot from the edge of the lot and left the same way. He never parked a car. Attention turned to a man who lived nearby and worked sporadic jobs. He was familiar to some store employees, often seen late at night buying small items or sitting on benches outside restaurants. He was described as quiet, polite, and forgettable. When questioned, he said he liked walking at night and often passed through the shopping center. Nothing about that was illegal. But access records from nearby stores showed him entering and exiting without making purchases, sometimes multiple times in one night. Former shoppers were interviewed again. This time, more details surfaced. Someone knocking on a car window to ask for directions. Someone offering to help carry groceries. Someone standing too close while pretending to look for keys. Each interaction on its own seemed harmless. Together, they formed a pattern. A breakthrough came when a woman reported a near encounter. She noticed a man circling her car slowly as she loaded groceries. When she locked the doors and waited inside, he stood several spaces away, watching. When another car pulled in nearby, he walked off calmly. Her description matched the individual seen in footage. Police searched the area surrounding the shopping center and discovered a narrow service road hidden behind trees and fencing. It wasn't well lit and wasn't monitored by cameras. From there, it was possible to observe the parking lot without being seen. In a makeshift camp hidden near the service road, investigators found personal items belonging to multiple missing people. Keys, identification cards, watches, items taken carefully and kept. Not sold. Not discarded. As the investigation expanded, detectives learned that the suspect targeted people based on routine. He watched who shopped late, who parked far from entrances, who lingered in their car checking messages. He avoided groups, avoided attention. He waited for isolation. During questioning, he admitted that the parking lot was ideal. He said people felt safe because they were close to stores, because lights were on, because other cars were nearby. He relied on that false sense of security. He also admitted that he never rushed. He waited for moments when people were distracted, putting groceries away, searching for keys, answering a phone. He described those moments as predictable. Perhaps the most unsettling detail was how many opportunities there had been to notice something was wrong. Complaints that weren't reported. Incidents that were brushed aside because nothing happened. A belief that public places couldn't hide danger. After the case became public, other shoppers came forward. Some remembered being followed to their car. Others recalled seeing the same man sitting in the lot night after night. At the time, they assumed he was just another shopper waiting for someone. The shopping center changed quickly. Security patrols increased. Lighting was improved. Cameras were added between parking rows. Signs encouraged shoppers to walk together and report suspicious behavior. But for many people, the sense of ease never returned. This story is disturbing because it happened in a place designed for convenience and familiarity. A place people visit without thinking. It didn't rely on force or chaos. It relied on distraction, routine, and the assumption that danger would look obvious. True crime often reminds us that awareness isn't about fear. It's about attention. It's about noticing patterns and trusting discomfort before it becomes something worse. Thank you for listening. If you're still here, tell me where you're watching from tonight, and don't forget to subscribe for more true crime stories for sleep, based on real events and told calmly, slowly, and without interruption. Sleep well tonight, and stay aware. Hello, and welcome back. Before we begin, I want to remind you that the story you're about to hear is based on real crimes involving real people. Certain names, locations, and identifying details have been changed to protect privacy, but the events themselves are drawn from documented investigations, court records, and witness accounts. This story is meant to be listened to slowly and quietly. If disturbing content affects you, it's okay to stop listening now. For everyone else, get comfortable. Let your breathing slow and steady. Let the quiet settle in around you. And as you listen, tell me in the comments where you're watching from tonight. I always enjoy reading them. If you enjoy these true crime stories for sleep, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future uploads. This story begins in a place people associate with calm repetition, a neighborhood walking trail that wound through parks, wooded areas, and residential streets. It was well maintained, clearly marked, and used daily by joggers, dog walkers, and cyclists. Locals considered it one of the safest places in the area. For years, nothing seemed wrong. People greeted each other in passing. Familiar faces appeared at the same times each morning or evening. That familiarity bred comfort, and comfort slowly turned into assumption. The first warning came quietly. A woman reported that someone had been following her during her evening walks. She said the man kept a distance but matched her pace, slowing when she slowed, stopping when she stopped. When she turned around, he pretended to stretch or check his phone. Police told her it was likely coincidence. Weeks later, another walker described a similar experience. Then another. Each report was vague. No threats. No direct confrontation. Nothing concrete enough to pursue. Then a jogger didn't come home. He was a middle-aged man who ran the same route every evening after work. When his family reported him missing, police searched the trail and nearby areas. His car was parked at the usual entrance. His phone was found near a bench along the path. There were no signs of a struggle. Authorities assumed a medical emergency or accident. But months later, a woman who walked the trail early each morning vanished under similar circumstances. Her dog was found wandering near the path. Her belongings were neatly placed beside it. Investigators began reviewing reports and realized all the disappearances shared the same stretch of trail, a quieter section where trees grew close and visibility was limited. It wasn't isolated, but it felt that way. Security cameras covered parking areas and nearby streets, but not the trail itself. Anyone familiar with the area could move unseen once they stepped onto the path. Residents were interviewed again. This time, people began remembering small things they had dismissed. A man standing just off the trail, watching silently. Someone appearing from the woods and disappearing again without explanation. A feeling of being observed that went away as soon as others appeared. A breakthrough came when a cyclist reported a close call. He noticed the same man several times along the trail, always appearing ahead of him despite taking different turns. When the cyclist stopped abruptly, the man turned and walked into the trees without explanation. His description matched earlier reports. Police set up discreet surveillance along the trail during peak hours. They observed a man who walked the path daily but never completed a full loop. He entered at different points, lingered in certain areas, and left without explanation. He carried no phone, no visible gear, and never interacted with others. A search of his residence uncovered detailed maps of the trail system. Certain areas were circled. Times of day were written in the margins. Notes described traffic patterns, blind spots, and seasonal changes in foliage that affected visibility. Investigators also found personal items belonging to multiple missing people, water bottles, fitness watches, earbuds. Items taken carefully and kept. Not sold. Not discarded. Former trail users came forward after the arrest. One woman recalled a man offering to help her look for a lost dog she hadn't mentioned. Another remembered being asked which direction she usually walked. At the time, the question seemed friendly. During questioning, the suspect admitted that he chose the trail because of its rhythm. People moved predictably. They wore headphones. They expected solitude but assumed safety. He relied on that contradiction. He also admitted that he never rushed. He waited for moments when people were alone and distracted. When the sound of footsteps faded. When routine made them less alert. The case changed the community. Lighting was added along the trail. Emergency call stations were installed. Volunteer patrols were organized. But for many residents, the trail never felt the same again. This story is disturbing because it unfolded in a place people used to clear their minds and feel healthy. A place built for movement and calm. It didn't rely on force or chaos. It relied on routine, isolation, and the belief that danger wouldn't exist somewhere so familiar. True crime reminds us that awareness isn't about fear. It's about attention. It's about trusting small signals and understanding that even peaceful places can hide patterns worth noticing. Thank you for listening. If you're still here, tell me where you're watching from tonight, and don't forget to subscribe for more true crime stories for sleep, based on real events and told calmly, slowly, and without interruption. Sleep well tonight, and stay aware. Hello, and welcome back. Before we begin, I want to gently remind you that the story you're about to hear is based on real crimes involving real people. Some names, locations, and identifying details have been changed to protect privacy, but the events themselves come from documented investigations, court records, and witness accounts. These stories are told slowly and calmly, meant for late-night listening. If disturbing material affects you, it's okay to stop here. For everyone else, get comfortable. Let your breathing slow. Let the room grow quiet around you. And as you listen, let me know in the comments where you're watching from tonight. I read them all. If you enjoy long-form true crime stories for sleep, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future uploads. This story begins in a place most people associate with waiting, a 24-hour laundromat tucked between apartment buildings on a dimly lit street. It wasn't new or modern. The lights buzzed softly. The machines rattled and hummed at all hours. For many residents, it was one of the few places open late at night, a neutral space where strangers sat quietly and minded their own business. For years, nothing seemed wrong. People came in alone, especially late at night, when it was easier to find open machines. The owner lived out of state and relied on security cameras and occasional maintenance visits. There was no staff on site overnight, but nothing serious had ever happened. The first incident barely registered. A woman told a friend that someone had watched her the entire time she waited for her clothes to dry. She said the man never touched her or spoke, just sat a few machines away, unmoving. When she left early, he didn't follow. She assumed she was just tired. Months later, another late-night customer described something similar. A man sitting inside the laundromat long after his clothes should have finished. No laundry. No phone. Just watching. The story was unsettling, but again, nothing actually happened. Then a regular customer didn't come home. He was a man in his early 30s who worked overnight shifts and did his laundry around 2 in the morning on his nights off. When his roommate reported him missing, police found his basket still inside the laundromat. His clothes were folded neatly on a table. His phone and keys were gone. At first, investigators considered the possibility that he left with someone he knew. But weeks later, another customer vanished under similar circumstances. Same time window. Same location. Laundry left behind. No signs of a struggle. Police reviewed security footage from inside the laundromat. The cameras were old and grainy, but they showed enough to raise concern. In both cases, the missing individuals were visible folding clothes when another man entered the frame. He sat down without using a machine. He watched quietly. In the footage, he never approached quickly. He waited. Sometimes he stood up and walked slowly to a vending machine or restroom, always returning to the same seat. He stayed just long enough to become part of the background. As detectives reviewed months of footage, they noticed the same man appearing repeatedly during overnight hours. Sometimes he stayed for minutes. Sometimes for hours. He never washed anything. He always left shortly after certain customers. Former patrons were interviewed. Many remembered him vaguely. A man who was always there. Someone who felt out of place but not threatening enough to draw attention. A few recalled leaving early because they felt uncomfortable but couldn't explain why. One woman described a moment that stood out. She said the man asked her what time the last bus ran. When she answered, he nodded and went silent. Minutes later, he asked if she lived nearby. She lied and said someone was picking her up. He left soon after. A breakthrough came when a nearby convenience store reported suspicious activity. An employee recognized the man from a police bulletin and remembered seeing him late at night, sometimes watching people walk toward the laundromat. He never entered the store. He just stood outside, observing. Police identified him as a maintenance contractor who had previously serviced the laundromat machines. He knew the layout. He knew which cameras worked poorly. He knew that the back door sometimes failed to latch properly. A search of his residence revealed notebooks filled with observations. Dates. Times. Descriptions of customers. Notes about who came alone, who stayed the longest, and who arrived on foot. Certain entries were marked with symbols. Others were crossed out. Investigators also found personal items belonging to multiple missing individuals. Headphones. Wallets. Bus passes. Items with no real value, but deeply personal. They were cleaned and stored carefully. During questioning, he admitted that laundromats were ideal. People waited. They were distracted. They expected strangers. No one questioned why someone sat quietly in the corner. He relied on the hum of machines and the assumption that help was nearby, even when it wasn't. He explained that he never forced conversations. He let others speak first. He waited for moments when someone stepped outside to take a call or check the time. He knew which nearby streets were poorly lit and which alleys were rarely used. What disturbed investigators most was how much time he spent observing without acting. Sometimes weeks passed between incidents. He was patient, methodical, invisible. After his arrest, more people came forward. Some remembered being followed partway home. Others recalled seeing him sitting in the laundromat late into the night with nothing to wash. At the time, they assumed he was just another insomniac passing time. The laundromat closed temporarily after the case became public. When it reopened, changes were made. Brighter lighting, clearer cameras, emergency call buttons, overnight attendance. But for many residents, the space never felt neutral again. This story is disturbing because it took place in a location built for waiting. A place where people sit quietly, surrounded by strangers, trusting that nothing will happen because nothing ever has. It didn't rely on sudden violence or chaos. It relied on patience, familiarity, and the human tendency to ignore discomfort when it doesn't come with a clear threat. True crime reminds us that danger often hides in routine. In places we visit without thinking. In moments when we assume being surrounded by others means we are safe. Thank you for listening. If you're still here, let me know where you're watching from tonight, and don't forget to subscribe for more true crime stories for sleep, based on real events and told slowly, calmly, and without interruption. Sleep well tonight, and stay aware. Hello, and welcome back. Before we begin, I want to gently remind you that the story you're about to hear is based on real crimes involving real people. Some names, locations, and identifying details have been changed to protect privacy, but the events themselves come from documented investigations, court records, and witness statements. These stories are told slowly and calmly, intended for nighttime listening. If disturbing material affects you, this is a good moment to stop. For everyone else, get comfortable. Let your breathing slow naturally. Let the quiet stretch out around you. And as you listen, let me know in the comments where you're watching from tonight. I always enjoy reading them. If you enjoy true crime stories for sleep like this one, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future uploads. This story begins in a place associated with familiarity and routine, a small, independently owned roadside motel located just off a long highway stretch. It wasn't the kind of place people stayed for vacations. It was used by truck drivers, traveling workers, and people passing through who needed a cheap room for the night. The sign flickered. The parking lot was usually half full. Nothing about it stood out. The motel had been there for decades, changing owners several times. Locals barely noticed it anymore. It existed quietly, serving a steady stream of strangers who arrived late, slept, and left early. For years, there were no complaints. No police calls. No incidents beyond the occasional noise dispute. That's why no one noticed when certain guests never checked out. At first, it was dismissed as poor record keeping. Some guests paid in cash. Some left before morning. The front desk was often staffed by a single person overnight, sometimes falling asleep during slow hours. Missing paperwork wasn't unusual. Then a woman's family began searching for her. She had been driving cross-country to visit relatives and stopped for the night at the motel. Her car was found parked outside her room days later. The room had been cleaned. Her belongings were gone. The staff insisted she had checked out. Police initially believed she left voluntarily. But months later, another missing person was linked to the same motel. Then another. All travelers. All passing through. All last seen checking in late at night. Investigators reviewed old registration cards and surveillance footage. The cameras were outdated and covered only the front desk and parking lot. Footage showed guests arriving, receiving keys, and heading to their rooms. What stood out was how often the same employee appeared in the background. He worked the night shift regularly. He was described as quiet, polite, and efficient. Guests barely remembered him. He never caused issues. He was the kind of person people assumed was harmless because he seemed bored more than anything else. As detectives reviewed footage more closely, patterns emerged. Certain guests were assigned rooms in the same area of the motel. Always at the far end. Always away from the main office. Always when the employee was alone on shift. Former guests were interviewed. Some remembered odd moments. A knock on the door late at night offering extra towels. Someone asking if everything was okay. Someone lingering in the hallway longer than necessary. Each moment seemed harmless on its own. One former guest described waking up to the sound of someone standing outside her door, not knocking, just standing there. When she turned on the light, the footsteps walked away. She never reported it. A breakthrough came when a contractor working on plumbing renovations found something hidden behind a removable wall panel in an unused room. Inside were personal items, phones, wallets, jewelry, identification cards. Items belonging to people reported missing. Police searched additional rooms and uncovered more concealed spaces. Some were accessible only to staff. Others required knowledge of the building's aging layout. It became clear that whoever was responsible understood the motel intimately. The night employee was questioned again. This time, inconsistencies appeared. His explanation for guest movements changed. His timelines didn't align with camera footage. When his residence was searched, investigators found detailed notes, room numbers, guest descriptions, dates, and times. Certain entries were marked with symbols. Others were crossed out. He admitted that the motel was ideal. Guests were anonymous. They were tired. They were far from home. No one expected danger in a place meant only for sleep. He relied on isolation, not force. On trust, not chaos. What disturbed investigators most was how long it went unnoticed. Because the victims were travelers, no single community noticed a pattern. Each disappearance happened far from home, scattered across jurisdictions. After the case became public, the motel shut down permanently. The building still stands, abandoned, its sign dark. Locals avoid it. Travelers pass without knowing what once happened inside. This story is disturbing because it unfolded in a place designed for rest. A place where people lower their guard because they believe the night will pass quietly. It didn't rely on sudden violence or obvious threat. It relied on anonymity, routine, and the belief that nothing bad happens in ordinary places. True crime reminds us that awareness doesn't mean fear. It means noticing patterns, listening to discomfort, and remembering that danger often hides behind familiarity. Thank you for listening. If you're still here, let me know where you're watching from tonight, and don't forget to subscribe for more true crime stories for sleep, based on real events and told slowly, calmly, and without interruption. Sleep well tonight, and stay aware.